Thank you for joining me at Tantrum House Studio D. I'm Melissa Dell. Are you a fan of NASCAR? I am. I grew up going to all kinds of races, road courses like Watkins Glen, 1-mile tracks like Dover, and even super speedways like Talladega. In Thunder Rolls, you can race on all those types of tracks. Let me show you how. Thunder Rolls is a dice placement, card programming racing game for 1 to 8 players that takes about an hour to play. It's designed by Richard Launius and is coming to Kickstarter from Zarok Games and Mr. B Games. This is a sponsored video. This is a prototype copy, so some of the design, components, names, terminology, all of that could change. In this video, I'm going to give you a broad look at the rules so you can have a good idea of how the game plays, but I'm not going to cover every single detail. The video has timestamps so you can easily navigate to different sections. I'm going to start with the setup. Now there are actually a lot of game decisions that happen in this step, so you might not want to skip it. First, you need to choose which race you're going to run. Each race card shows the type of track, oval or road course, and how many stages you're going to run. More stages mean a longer game. The card also lists how many dice you roll and any special rules for the track. For example, on a super speedway, there's more drafting and a chance for the big one to happen. Once you've chosen your race, set the track board on the appropriate side. Deal 3 Thunder cards under each action location 1 through 6. Down arrows mean face down, up arrows mean face up. Place the shuffled Thunder cards, Hazard cards, and Speed cards face down on their spots in the middle of the board. Each player chooses a racing team and takes the team card, race car, and matching colored dice and tokens. Place 1 token on the start space of the lap track and 1 on the 0 space on the score track. Any race teams that were not chosen become non-player drivers. That way you'll always have 8 cars on the track to interact with, no matter how many players there are. For the non-player teams, add their lap and score tokens to the board and place the corresponding non-player driver cards on the table. Place the non-player action cards nearby. The last part of setup is qualifying for your starting position. You'll be placing the race cars on the track based on the qualifying cards the players choose. Shuffle the qualifying cards and deal 2 to each player. Each player chooses 1 and discards the other. Then everyone reveals their chosen card. The player with the highest value card starts first, then the next highest, and so on. The non-player drivers have a set qualifying number, so slot them in where they belong. They might start before some of the actual players. Give the player in the starting position the leader token and place the non-player driver cards by the leader. It may seem like you'd always choose the higher numbered qualifying card you're dealt, but the lower numbered cards have special one-time actions, so you might decide to trade a potentially higher start position for a powerful advantage later. Now that everything's set up and you have your starting position, it's time to get into the driver's seat. Each stage of Thunder Rolls is played in 2 phases, the rolling phase and the thunder phase. In the rolling phase, you'll be assigning dice to gain immediate actions and to hopefully win some thunder cards. In the thunder phase, you'll program the thunder cards you gain during the rolling phase and see how well your car races against the others. If your chosen race has 2 stages, the top performers in the first stage will get some bonus points. Then you'll play another stage with both the rolling and thunder phases. Now let's take a closer look at the rolling phase. Starting with the leader and going in clockwise order, each player will take a turn. On your turn, you roll your dice and then place them in sets according to their value. You have to choose 1 set of dice and assign all of them to the corresponding action. Each time it comes back to your turn, you'll re-roll your remaining dice and assign one of the sets. You continue taking turns until you run out of dice. When you assign dice to an action, you determine priority based on the other dice already there. If you have more dice, you go to the top. If you have equal to or fewer dice, you go below. If you add more dice on a later turn, adjust priority if necessary. At the end of the phase, when everyone has used all their dice, the Thunder cards under each action will be drafted by the players who hold priority 1, 2, and 3 for that action. Thunder cards are important, so you definitely want to have priority on several actions. But you also have to consider the immediate actions you can gain. The actions are listed on the board, but some have additional benefits or restrictions based on the race you're running, so be sure to keep the race card nearby. When you assign ones to the pit stop, you can refresh your reroll ability if you've already used it. Having dice on the pit stop also protects you from some of the harsh hazard penalties. Placing 2s on Rubbin' is Racing affects the race cars on the track. You can either side draft, which makes a car next to you go backward 1 space, or you can cross over, which lets you swap spots with the car in front of you. Then you can move 1 space forward. When you place 3s on the low line, you can move your car forward 1 space. When you place 4s on the crew chief action, you take one of your previously placed dice and add it back to your pool, and you can move 1 space. When you place 5s on the high line, you can draft 1 space. To draft, there has to be a car either directly in front or behind you. Then you move both cars 1 space forward. When you place 6s on the groove, you can move your car 2 spaces. During the rolling phase, you're balancing several decisions. Consider this roll. If there's no one to cross over or side draft, you probably don't want to place the 2. You could place the 6s, you'd move 2 spaces and probably earn the top priority, but it leaves you with just 2 dice remaining for the phase. The 3 might be your best option. You get to move 1 space, you move up in priority, and you'll still have 4 dice left to roll on your next turn. During this phase, the non-player drivers will also be activating. They don't roll or place dice, but they do have action cards. At the end of each placement round, before the leader takes their next turn, they flip an action card for each non-player driver. In the rolling phase, you look at the top part of the action card. It could show a movement number, an action like draft or crossover, or a helmet, which activates the driver's power. The power is shown on the driver's card. Eventually, players will run out of dice and have to pass. Once you pass, you sit out for the rest of the rolling phase. The non-player drivers will also stop activating at this point. After everyone has passed, you then resolve the priority of each action, starting with number 1. If any cards are face down, you flip them up and the player with top priority chooses one of the cards. Then the player with second priority chooses a card, and the player with third priority gains the last card. You'll repeat this process with each action. A few of the actions also have a penalty or benefit that you'll resolve. If you don't place any dice on the pit action, you'll have to draw a hazard card. These aren't good. If you place dice on the low line, but didn't secure one of the priority spots, you get to move your car 2 spaces. Once all the actions are resolved, check to see how many Thunder cards you gained. If you have fewer than 4, draw speed cards until you have a total of 4 cards. Speed cards aren't as good as Thunder cards. If you have more than 4 Thunder cards, discard down to 4. Now you're ready to move into the Thunder phase. Most of the racing happens during the Thunder phase. You'll have 4 movement turns that are based on the cards you gained at the end of the rolling phase. Your goal is to be farther ahead of any other cars when the phase ends. There are a few steps to this phase. First, you give the leader token to the player whose car is farthest ahead. You also give the non-player driver cards and action deck to that player. Next, players make hazard rolls for each card they have with this icon. If you roll a 1, you have to draw a hazard card. Now it's time to program your cards. This will determine the order of your movement and actions. You'll place the card you want to activate first, face down in the leftmost spot, and then continue working to the right. If you have any hazard cards, place them on top of your programmed thunder or speed cards. Some need to be placed in a specific spot. Once everyone has finished programming cards into their 4 slots, you'll move into resolving them. One at a time, starting with the leader and moving clockwise around the table, each player will reveal their first card and resolve its effects. Most of the cards show a movement number and possibly an action. When you move, you need to enter a space directly in front of you or ahead of you to either side. If you're blocked, you can push the card directly in front of you. You and any players whose cards are pushed must roll a die. If you match rolls with a car adjacent to you, you both lose control and go backward 2 spaces. If you don't match, the push was successful and you move the cars forward. Non-player drivers have a designated number for their roll listed on their card. Most of the actions can be used either at the beginning or the end of your movement, like side drafting, drafting, and crossovers. I mentioned how those worked earlier in the video. Another action you might see is clean air. Before you begin your movement, if the space directly in front of you is empty, you can claim the clean air bonus of an additional 2 movement spaces. Once everyone has resolved their first card, the non-player drivers will activate. The player with the leader token draws an action card for each non-player driver. During the thunder phase, you look at the bottom portion of the action card. The non-player drivers perform the same types of moves and actions as the human players. They might help you by drafting your car or hinder you with a crossover. You'll go through the same process 3 more times for the cards in slots 2, 3, and 4. When a car completes a lap by crossing the start-finish line, move its marker up on the lap tracker. This will help you keep track of which cars are in the lead. This car looks like it's winning, but it's actually in last place because it hasn't completed a lap yet. If you have a hazard card in the slot you're activating, reveal it first. Usually, it will move you backward a number of spaces. If you didn't pit during the rolling phase, you'll have an additional penalty. After you resolve your hazard, you reveal the card underneath and take your normal movement and actions. Once every player and the non-player drivers have resolved all 4 of their turns, you finish the thunder phase. If you're playing with advanced rules, players gain an extra 2 moves for each set of flag icons they've matched in their programmed line of cards. Then you determine scoring. If you're playing a 2-stage race, at the end of the first stage, you award 2 points for the car in first place and 1 point for the car in second place. Keep all the cars in their positions and begin stage 2 with another rolling phase. If you're playing a 1-stage race, or this is the end of your second stage, you award final points to each driver based on their finishing position. The player who is farthest ahead gains 12 points. The second placed player earns 10 points. And then each position after that is 1 fewer point. Whoever has the most points wins. You could leave it at just 1 race. But Thunder Rolls also comes with rules for playing a series of 2 or 3 races, or even a championship season with 8 to 12 races. There are benefits for race winners and even a playoff race at the end. Whoever accumulates the most points over the season will be crowned the champion. So now you're ready to roll and race your way to victory. Just be sure to stay in the groove. Once everyone has resolved their first card, the non-player drivers will activate. The player with a leader token draws an action card for each non-player driver. I want to say that again. Most of the racing happens during the Thunder phase. You'll have 4 movement turns that are based on the cards you gained during the rolling phase. Your goal is to be farther ahead of any other cars when the phase ends. cars and cards. So now you're ready to roll and race your way. Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
If you're playing with advanced